Hey, welcome to Books, Builds, and More. I'm Travis, and today I'm doing a review for the first book of the Gwendy trilogy by Stephen King and Richard Chizmar titled Gwendy's Button Box. This is the second book in the Jurassic Reading Challenge of 2026 that I'm participating in this year. It was originally something else, but I ended up, circumstances caused this to change. So this is my official entry of the month of February. And February was Triceratops month, where the criteria was to read something part of a trilogy due to the fact that Triceratops has 3 horns. It was some pretty cool trivia there. So, on to the review. So, this story was quite unique. It's a bit of a novella. It's a shorter story, especially for Stephen King, but this is a collaborative work because he co-wrote it with Richard Chizmar, obviously. And the story is about this young girl who comes across this stranger who gives her this magic box that's kind of weird in a way. It's got a lot of buttons on it. It seems almost robotic the way it's described with 2 levers on the sides that pull open. One side gives her like an endless supply of these neat little chocolates, and the other side gives her these like beyond mint condition perfect 1891 coins. And the buttons do various things on top, and they tend to be quite destructive in different ways. So yeah, it's kind of a wild premise, and the premise actually reminds me of an episode. I think it was a show in the 80s called Amazing Stories. And in one episode, there was this kind of distraught married couple. They were like down on their luck. The woman turned out to be quite greedy. She was the more antagonistic of the two. But this stranger shows up at their door with this box with a single button on the top, and he explains basically that he gives it to the wife, and she takes it and mulls it over. The choice is whether or not to push the button, and if she were to push the button, she would receive like $1 million, or at least some, exorbitant amount of money. But at the same time, someone that she doesn't know will die. Well, and I'm going to go ahead and spoil it here. She pushes the button. Of course, she pushes the button because she's just a greedy wench. And therefore, she gets the money. The stranger comes back to collect the box. He says, yeah, here's your money. But now someone you don't know has died. I'm sorry. Well, of course, the ending twist to that story is fairly obvious, I think. The stranger takes the box back and says he's going to give the box and the stipulations to someone else whom she doesn't know. So, you can draw your own conclusions there. So I wanted to illustrate that because that is kind of the way this story goes in a way, because Gwendy takes this box from the stranger, and because she sees the coins and the chocolate, and they start to do good in her life. The coins promise her, a chance at receiving a lot of money if she were to sell these coins or pawn them off or something. But the chocolates, she eats the chocolates, and her life just seems to get better. Like she physically gets better. She starts out like plus size. In a way, she's considered pudgy in the story, and she wears glasses. So eventually the glasses come off, and, she starts to develop in a very, healthy way. And she's very beautiful. She becomes very intelligent. I think the chocolates, improve her physically, while the coins provide her financially, and with that kind of security. But with the buttons being uncertain about exactly what they are, of course, buttons are going to be pushed in this story. I mean, why wouldn't they be? The box is both a gift and a curse. So it's that kind of tale. It's that thing that's, you have to give something in order to get something. But, when you give something, it doesn't always turn out to be the best thing. Well, nor is getting something, for that matter, especially in this story. But the biggest surprised me in this story, I think has to be in the mysterious stranger for a couple of reasons. First of all, he's only in two scenes in this book physically, um, for the most part, and I'll explain why. You see him when he first, at the beginning of the story, when he first gives the box to Gwendy, but you don't see him again until the end of the story when he comes to take the box away. But during the time throughout the story, we kind of watch Gwendy grow up. She starts out 12 years old, and then we follow her into basically post graduation, post college graduation age. So she's an officially an adult by the time the story ends. And we see the effects that the box has, improvements, and the negativity it brings to her. But we also catch glimpses of this stranger's presence around. He may not be physically around, but he is like as a reminder. There are things, particularly with this hat. I knew that this black hat on the cover would be some sort of significance in this book somewhere, and that's pretty much it so far. I've only read the first book, of course, of this. I've got two more to go. Don't know when I'll get to them, but regardless, that's pretty much how his character is being portrayed during this story. Is he's kind of like this afterthought, this reminder, this constant reminder that she's in possession of this box, because there are times where she sees that she wants to get rid of the box because she doesn't like the temptation. She doesn't like the fact that she feels like she's being greedy about it. And especially when she discovers that, hey, this thing can actually cause badness. It is destructive, it's a malevolent object, and she wants to get rid of it. But she never does. She holds on to it until he comes back to get it. But this is where I was really surprised about this mysterious guy. For the first reason, his character was a little bit of a twist. He ended up being something that I didn't expect at the end of the story. And I'm not going to say any more about that because I would like someone to read this book and see what they think. But it took me by surprise the turn that this character took. But for the second reason, his name is Richard Ferris, this mysterious guy in this book. RF. In the Stephen King universe, what character has RF initials? Randall Flagg. So my first thought was, okay, this is Randall Flagg because the character's personality in this story very closely matches that to Randall Flagg. So I was thinking, maybe this might be an adjacent to the Dark Tower series, of which I am reading this year as an extended reading project. So I thought maybe I've lucked out and I have yet another adjacent book. However, that may be stretching it by the turn that this Richard Ferris guy takes in this at the end of this book. So I'm really not quite sure. But beyond that stretch, honestly, there's nothing, at least in this first story that I read, has no connection to the Dark Tower series that I can think of. Also, there are some illustrations throughout the story, mostly just kind of random here and there. There aren't too many, but they are there, and they just kind of add a little bit of character to the story. So yeah, that was kind of fun too. I always like when good illustrations are in books that help kind of, aid the imagination a little bit. So basically, in sum, it's a pretty quick read. The chapters are not very long at all. Nothing is overly explained anywhere. It's very, I'd say it's fairly quick paced. I really would. And it's just completely straight to the point every time. It just jumps from one thing to the other. There's really not a whole lot of downtime in the story. It just keeps moving and does what it does. And it's even heartbreaking in a couple of places. I mean, it's truly heartbreaking. And Gwendy is actually, despite the fact that this is a moral story that plays on her greed, but she plays it very well, and she's a very well-written character in this way. And she has parents that love her, and they're you know, I mean, they have their issues, or at least it's implied that they had issues, because I think the effects of the box go beyond Gwendy. You know, it affects other aspects of her life, but still it revolves around her, but it does happen to affect certain others in her life for the better or the worse, depending on, you know, how the box is used throughout. There are some horrific scenes in this book, nothing gory or graphic or anything, but kind of disturbing. Like there's an attempted assault in a more intimate manner, if you get my meaning there. You know, you have to be careful what you say on these platforms nowadays. So I'll leave it at that. But it's a good story. It was a really good story. I really enjoyed this. I'm going to rate it 4 stars. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good rating for this, the way I felt about it. It didn't like rock my world or anything, but it was nowhere near a bad little story at all. And I'm already curious to find out how the other 2 stories will play out for the rest of this trilogy. But that's it. That's all I've got for Gwendy's Button Box. This was my Triceratops read for the month of February as part of my Jurassic Reading Challenge of 2026. I am quite satisfied, even though I didn't really want another Stephen King book on this challenge like I did in January. I had one, but it is what it is. So anyway, if you've stuck with me this long, I hope this was enjoyable, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.